Leila Simona Talani is Professor of International Political Economy at King's College London. Welcome to the programme. What do you think is at the heart of this political crisis?
Well, the heart, honestly, I think, is very much the decision about whether or not to go to early elections. Draghi got the majority today in the vote at the Senate. They got a majority of 172 votes, which is, big enough, I would say, for Italy. It should have been 166. So it is actually at the moment enjoying a majority. And of course, he had declared that they wouldn't stay in government if he didn't have the support of all the parties. And Five-Star Movement did not vote in favor of this majority day, but he could stay if he wanted. So it is, the balance is pretty difficult to find, but I personally believe it's all related to whether or not they decide to go for early election this time.
For people who are not familiar with Italian politics, just explain to us, in the context of debt, why Italy's political and economic situation is so precarious.
Well, there are various reasons. The precariousness of the economic situation is related to the existence of a very huge debt to GDP and also now a deficit to GDP. Obviously, that was made much worse both by the Eurozone crisis of 2010 and 11 and obviously also the COVID-19 crisis. But at the moment, the economic situation is not that bad. We're actually growing at 2.8% this year, so it's I think more than other nations within the other member states of the EU. And clearly the war in Ukraine didn't help, and the growth in Ukraine did not help Europe in general for the energy prices. And the same is the same for the inflation. Inflation is high in Italy, but it's high in the rest of Europe. So I wouldn't say the situation is much worse than anywhere else at the moment. But the political crisis is not really related to the economic situation. It's related to the fact that going to early elections could actually be advantageous for a number of parties in Italy. And many of them, I think, prefer to go for elections now in October instead of waiting until May. In any case, the government would end in May. So it's only a few months which are left, and voting earlier instead of later could actually be an advantage for Italy instead of a disadvantage, although it seems difficult to understand from abroad. But I do believe this is the case. And I also think there is a huge number of people and parties in Italy that would prefer to vote now instead of later.
Some commentators have suggested this is a rather cynical ploy by Five Star to bring down the Draghi government to try and revive its own support base. Is that fair?
It is pretty fair, considering also the Five-Star Movement has underwent a division inside itself. So part of it has left, led by Di Maio, and then only the part which is led now by Conte, the ex-minister, is left. It's many less votes than before. I think it's around 68 votes. It used to be around 100, so it's much less strong than it used to be. But to be honest and to be fair, not only the Five-Star Movement would gain from early elections. There are others, all the right-wing ones, Fratelli d'Italia with Meloni, Lega Nord, that believe they would actually gain from early elections. And honestly, I think even in the left, there are parties that think that going to early elections would be beneficial to them. So this is why there is, I think, a sort of consensus that early elections could be good for many political parties, although clearly for the economy they might be bad, but this is still to be seen. We don't know yet.
Leila Simona Talani, Professor of International Political Economy at King's College in London, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.